My name is Zoe. I'm 30 years old, and this is the story of how my own home taught me who my family really was. I spent 3 weeks painting walls, scrubbing floors, and learning to use a drill from YouTube tutorials. It was my first house, my dream. But at 5:41 p.m. on the day of my housewarming, my sister posted a photo of herself with a brand new SUV, our whole family beaming by her side. That was the moment I realized I'd been celebrating the wrong people my whole life. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. The smell of chili and cornbread filled every corner of my 2-bedroom craftsman. I had spent the morning simmering the chili, letting the spices bloom until the aroma felt like a warm hug. The cornbread, baked from scratch using my grandmother's recipe, sat cooling on the counter, its golden top glistening with melted butter. It was perfect. Everything was perfect. I walked through the small house, my bare feet padding softly on the newly polished hardwood floors. 3 weeks of my life had been poured into these walls. 3 weeks of scrubbing away the memories of the previous owners, of patching holes and painting over scuffs. I'd stayed up late watching tutorials on how to fix a leaky faucet and hang a light fixture. My knuckles were scraped, my back ached, and I had paint in my hair, but every bit of it felt like a victory. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was proof that I could build something on my own. On the small porch, I had hung string lights. They cast a soft, inviting glow as the afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon. The table in my dining nook was set for 8 people. My parents, my sister Emma, and her boyfriend, my aunt and uncle, and my cousin. I had even made place cards, writing each name in my best cursive. Each chair represented a person I thought was a pillar in my life. Each setting was a symbol of my desire to share my biggest accomplishment with them. At 5 p.m., the official start time, I stood by the window, my heart thumping with a happy, nervous rhythm. The street was quiet. They're probably running a little late, I told myself, smoothing down my dress for the 10th time. At 5:10, I sent a light-hearted text to the family group chat. The chili is calling your name. ETA? I watched the 3 dots appear under my sister's name, then disappear. No reply. At 5:20, the anxiety started to curdle the excitement in my stomach. I checked my phone again. Nothing. No missed calls. No texts explaining they were stuck in traffic. Just silence. I walked back to the kitchen and stirred the chili, the thick, bubbling stew a stark contrast to the cold knot forming in my gut. The cornbread was no longer warm. The ice in the pitcher of sweet tea was beginning to melt. At 5:41, my phone finally buzzed. It wasn't a call or a text. It was a notification from Instagram. My sister Emma had posted a new photo. My finger trembled as I tapped the screen. There she was, standing in the parking lot of a car dealership, her arms thrown wide in a gesture of pure triumph. Next to her was a gleaming silver SUV, so new it still had the temporary paper license plate. A giant red bow was stuck to the hood. On her right were my parents. Mom beaming with a pride I hadn't seen since Emma won a spelling bee in 3rd grade. Dad had his arm around her, his smile wide and genuine. My aunt, uncle, and cousin were there too, clapping and holding a congratulations balloon. The caption read, "She's all mine." Couldn't have done it without my amazing family surprising me and helping me sign the papers. Best day ever! Family first, I read the caption again. And again, the words blurred. Family first. The names tagged in the photo were the same names on the place card sitting on my empty dining table. The comments started flooding in. Mom wrote, "So proud of our girl. You deserve it." Dad commented, "That's my Emma. Hard work pays off." My aunt added a string of heart emojis. Hard work? Emma hadn't worked a steady job in 5 years. I looked from my phone screen to the empty chairs at my table. I looked at the string lights twinkling on the porch, their cheerful glow now feeling like a cruel joke. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't gotten stuck in traffic. They had made a choice. They had chosen her new car over my new home. They had chosen her moment over mine, just like they always did. I sank into one of the empty chairs, the beautifully written place card for my mother staring back at me. And in that quiet, chili-scented room, surrounded by evidence of a celebration that would never happen, I finally understood. I hadn't just bought a house. I had bought a front-row ticket to the truth of my own life. And the truth was, I had never been the main event. I was only ever the person expected to buy a ticket and clap for someone else. In my family, love wasn't a constant, steady light that warmed everyone equally. It was a spotlight, and it was almost always pointed at my younger sister, Emma. I spent my childhood standing in the shadows, learning that my role was to be the quiet, stable backdrop against which she could sparkle. The conditions for earning their affection were never spoken aloud, but I learned them through 1,000 tiny cuts. I remember report card day in 4th grade. I had worked tirelessly, staying up late to memorize multiplication tables and perfect my cursive. I came home clutching a pristine manila envelope, my heart swelling with pride. I had straight A's. I handed it to my mother, my eyes searching her face for the praise I craved. She glanced at it, a faint, distracted smile on her lips. "That's wonderful, Zoe," she said, her attention already drifting back to the television. "That's what we expect from you?" There was no celebration, no ice cream, no call to Grandma to share the good news. My success was simply the fulfillment of a duty. An hour later, Emma came home, her own report card crumpled in her backpack. She'd gotten mostly C's and a D in math. She burst into tears, convinced she was a failure. My parents swarmed her with comfort. Dad sat her down at the kitchen table, talking her through every subject, telling her how smart she was and that grades didn't define her. Mom made her favorite dessert, chocolate pudding with extra whipped cream. "We're just so glad you're trying your best, sweetie," Mom cooed, stroking her hair. "That's all that matters." I sat on the stairs, watching them praise her for mediocrity while my excellence had been met with a nod. That was the first time I understood. My best was an expectation. Her best was a miracle. The pattern repeated itself through our teenage years, especially when it came to money. At 16, I wanted a car more than anything. Not a new car, just a used, reliable one to get me to my part-time job and back. My parents told me money was tight. "If you want a car, you'll have to earn it yourself, Zoe," Dad said, not unkindly, but with an air of finality. "It will build character," so I did. I spent my entire summer working as a cashier at the local grocery store. I endured rude customers, sticky conveyor belts, and the endless, monotonous beeping of the scanner. I gave up weekends with friends and trips to the public pool. Every dollar from my paycheck went into a savings account, my car fund. By the end of the summer, I had saved enough for a beat-up but functional decade-old sedan. I was immensely proud. 2 years later, for Emma's 16th birthday, my parents led her outside to the driveway where a brand-new compact car sat waiting, a giant bow on its hood, the same kind of bow that would one day sit on her SUV. She hadn't worked a day in her life. When I looked at my parents, a question burning in my eyes, my mother just smiled. "She's just not the type to work a summer job, you know? It would crush her spirit," Dad added. "Besides, we got a great financing deal. The money that had been too tight for my car insurance had somehow materialized for her down payment. When it came time for college, I knew I was on my own. I earned a partial scholarship and worked 3 jobs to cover the rest, shelving books in the campus library in the early mornings, serving coffee at a bustling cafe in the afternoons, and tutoring underclassmen at night. My life was a blur of textbooks, caffeine, and exhaustion. I ate ramen noodles and counted every penny. My parents called my ambition an obsession with money. They warned me I was becoming too serious, that I would forget how to have fun. Meanwhile, Emma went to an out-of-state art school, fully funded by student loans and our parents. She rarely worked. Her Instagram feed was a colorful collage of parties, weekend trips, and expensive art supplies. I'll never forget the night I was hunched over my desk, studying for a brutal organic chemistry final, when a picture of her popped up on my phone. She was in Cabo San Lucas on a spontaneous spring break trip, laughing on a beach, a tropical drink in her hand. The trip, she later told me, was paid for with her student loan refund. When I mentioned it to my mom, she just sighed wistfully. "Oh, to be young and carefree. She's just finding herself, Zoe. You should try it sometime." I never said anything. I never complained. I just kept my head down and worked harder, believing that one day my effort would be seen. I thought that if I became successful enough, stable enough, they would finally have to acknowledge it. I learned to stay quiet and let Emma shine, because every time I asked for a little bit of light for myself, I was told I was standing in her way, casting a shadow on her potential. I became the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never asked for anything. And in doing so, I taught them that I didn't need anything at all. For years after college, my life was a quiet routine of work and saving. I lived in a series of small, cramped apartments with temperamental plumbing and neighbors who played music too loud. Each apartment felt temporary, a stepping stone. My real goal, the one I held tight in my chest, was a home of my own, a place with a door that was mine to lock, walls that were mine to paint, and a patch of earth that was mine to tend. The path to that dream was paved with sacrifices. While my friends were going on vacations and buying new cars, I was brown bagging my lunch and sticking to a budget so strict it felt suffocating. Every month, I would transfer a significant portion of my paycheck into a high-yield savings account I'd nicknamed the Escape Fund. The irony was that while I was saving for my own future, I was also helping to pay for my parents' present. At least once every few months I'd get a call. "Zoe, honey, we're in a bit of a bind," my dad would start, his voice heavy with manufactured stress. "The property taxes are higher than we expected," or "the water heater broke." I always knew what came next. I would transfer them a few hundred, sometimes $1,000. "Just until we get ahead," they'd promise. They never got ahead. Emma, meanwhile, was pursuing her dream of being a freelance graphic designer, which meant she was chronically underemployed and still living at home, contributing nothing. My money was patching the leaks in their budget that her lifestyle created. I was the family's silent, unacknowledged investor, but I kept saving. I watched the number in my escape fund climb, slowly at first, then with more momentum. The day I finally had enough for a 20% down payment in my city felt unreal. I had done it. Despite everything, I had built a foundation for myself, by myself. The house hunt was grueling. I was outbid on 3 different properties. I walked through houses that looked charming online, but smelled of mildew and desperation in person. I started to lose hope. Then one rainy Tuesday, my realtor called me about a new listing. "It's small, Zoe, but it has character," she said. The moment I saw it, I knew. It was a 2-bedroom craftsman bungalow, painted a cheerful but slightly faded blue. It had a wide front porch with a swing that creaked when you moved it, and in the small backyard, a lemon tree stood proudly, its branches heavy with fruit. Inside, the afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It wasn't perfect. The floors needed refinishing, and the kitchen was outdated, but it felt solid. It felt like a home. It felt like mine. The process of closing was a terrifying mountain of paperwork. I signed my name so many times my hand cramped. Handing over that cashier's check for the down payment was the scariest and most exhilarating moment of my life. When the lawyer slid the keys across the table, I just stared at them. 2 small metal keys on a simple ring. They were the keys to my sanctuary. I decided to tell my family over Sunday dinner at their house. I was nervous, but my excitement overshadowed everything. I imagined them being proud, maybe even a little impressed. I pulled out my phone and showed them the picture of the house. My mother peered at the screen. Her first words weren't "congratulations" or "it's beautiful." Her first words were, "Is there a guest room? You need to make sure there's a nice guest room for your sister when she stays over." I forced a laugh. "There are 2 bedrooms, Mom." My dad clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to feel supportive but felt heavy, proprietary. "So proud of you, Zoe. This is a big step," he began, and for a second my heart soared. Then he continued, "Maybe Emma can move in with you for a while. Just until she figures things out and gets her business off the ground. It would be a huge help." The smile on my face felt like it was cracking. I looked at Emma, who was already nodding along, as if the idea was not only logical, but her right. "Yeah, that could work," she mused. "I could help you decorate. You've never been very good at that." I tried to keep my voice light. "Oh, I don't think that'll be necessary. I'm looking forward to having my own space." I laughed it off, pretending it was a joke, but a cold, heavy feeling settled deep in my gut. They didn't see my accomplishment. They saw a resource. They saw a new, convenient solution to Emma's problems. My home wasn't my sanctuary. It was their new safety net. That night, after I left their house, I drove to my place. I unlocked the door and stepped into the dark, empty rooms. The smell of fresh paint and old wood filled the air. This was my house. My name was on the deed. My money had paid for it. But as I stood there in the silence, I felt a creeping dread. I had built these walls to keep the world out, but I was beginning to realize the biggest threat wasn't outside. It was from the very people I was about to invite in. I threw myself into planning the housewarming with a kind of desperate optimism. I think a part of me believed that if I created the perfect party, if I showed them how much this house meant to me, they would have to see me. They would have to celebrate me. It was a foolish hope, but it was all I had. I sent out the invitations a month in advance. A simple, elegant card with a picture of the house on the front. I followed up with texts and calls. Everyone confirmed. We wouldn't miss it for the world. My mom had chirped over the phone. The day of the party, I was a whirlwind of activity. I didn't just make chili. I made my dad's favorite kind, with a little extra spice. I didn't just bake cornbread. I made sure to have the honey butter he liked to slather on it. I bought Emma's favorite brand of sparkling iced tea, even though I thought it was too sweet. I curated a playlist with painstaking care, blending my mom's beloved 80s rock anthems with the pop hits Emma always played in her car. Every detail was a small, unspoken plea. Please see how much I care about you. Please care about me too. By 4:30 p.m., everything was ready. The house was spotless. The string lights on the porch cast a magical glow as twilight began to settle. The candles on the dining table were lit, their flames flickering gently. I took a deep breath, the combined scent of simmering food, melting wax, and my own nervous excitement filling my lungs. I felt a flutter of pure, unadulterated hope. This was it. This was the moment my family would finally gather under my roof and see what I had built. At 5 p.m., I stood by the front window, peering down the quiet, tree-lined street. My heart beat a happy rhythm against my ribs. Any minute now, my dad's familiar truck would round the corner. 10 p.m. The street remained empty. The knot of anxiety from that Sunday dinner returned, a faint tightening in my chest. They're just running late, I told myself. I sent the text to the group chat. The chili is calling your name. ETA? 5:25 p.m. Still nothing. The silence in the house was starting to feel heavy, oppressive. The cheerful music from my carefully crafted playlist suddenly sounded tinny and hollow. I walked onto the porch, hugging my arms against a sudden chill. The street was deserted. A neighbor walked their dog, offering me a friendly wave, and the simple, normal act made my isolation feel even sharper. 3 p.m. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A wave of relief washed over me. It was probably my mom, calling to say they were just a few minutes away. I pulled it out, my thumb swiping to unlock the screen, but it wasn't a call. It was the Instagram notification. The image filled my screen, bright and painfully clear. There was Emma, her face split into a triumphant grin. There was the shiny new SUV. And there was my entire family, gathered around her like she was a queen holding court. My mother's arm was wrapped tightly around Emma's shoulders, her face glowing with a kind of radiant pride I had only ever seen directed at my sister. My father stood on Emma's other side, looking at her with an expression of pure adoration, the kind of look a father gives his child when they've done something truly remarkable, a look he had never, not once, given me. My eyes scanned the photo, taking in every devastating detail. My aunt holding the balloon, my cousin giving a thumbs up, the red bow on the car's hood. They weren't just at the dealership. They had planned this. The surprise, the celebration, it had been an event that was happening at the exact same time they were supposed to be at my house. The phone felt impossibly heavy in my hand. My vision started to blur, the vibrant colors of the photo swimming before my eyes. A wave of nausea rolled through me. They hadn't just forgotten. They hadn't just been running late. They had received my invitation, said yes, and then consciously and deliberately chose to go somewhere else. They chose to celebrate a purchase, a thing, over a home, a life I had built from scratch. I stumbled back inside and sank onto the couch. The smell of the chili, once so warm and inviting, was now thick and cloying. On the stove, I could hear it bubbling, sticking to the bottom of the pot, starting to burn. The sound was a perfect match for the feeling in my chest. Something good and hopeful being scorched into a bitter mess. I sat there in the gathering darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights. The only illumination came from the mocking twinkle of the string lights on the porch. I was completely, utterly alone in a house that was supposed to be full of laughter and family. The party wasn't just empty. It was a graveyard of my own hope. For the next hour and a half, I didn't move. I sat on my new couch, in my new house, and let the silence swallow me. The house grew dark around me. The smell of burned chili was a thick, acrid cloud in the air. I didn't clean it up. I didn't turn off the stove. I just sat there. The Instagram photo burned onto the back of my eyelids. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw their smiling faces. A perfect family portrait with one person conspicuously missing, me. The initial shock and hurt began to cool and harden into something else. Something cold and sharp. Anger. A deep, quiet rage started to uncoil in my stomach. How dare they? How dare they accept my invitation? Let me cook and clean and prepare? Let me sit here waiting all while they were off celebrating her? The disrespect was so profound, so complete. It was almost stunning. It wasn't just neglect anymore. This was a deliberate act of erasure. At exactly 7:01 p.m., my phone, which had been sitting dark and silent on the cushion beside me, lit up and started to vibrate. The screen read, Dad. For a fleeting second, a stupid, stubborn piece of my heart hoped. Maybe this was the apology. Maybe they had realized what they'd done and were calling, full of regret. I took a shaky breath, swiped to answer, and held the phone to my ear. Hello? I said. My voice was raspy. Zoe, my dad's voice came through the line, brisk and businesslike. There was no warmth in it, no trace of apology. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't mention the housewarming. He sounded like he was calling about a utility bill. "We need to talk about your house," he said, getting straight to the point. My heart, which had foolishly leaped with hope, dropped into my stomach like a stone. "What about it?" I asked, my voice flat. "Well," he began, and I could hear the rustle of papers in the background. "Emma's car registration is a bit of a mess. Her credit isn't great, so the insurance is sky high. We're going to use your address to register the car for now. It'll save her a ton of money. It's no big deal." I was silent for a long moment, processing the sheer audacity of his words. They skipped my housewarming to buy her a car, and now they want to use my new home to commit insurance fraud for that same car. The anger I'd been feeling sharpened into a fine, dangerous point. "No," I said. "No? What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. That's fraud, Dad." He let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a laugh of dismissal, the one he always used when he thought I was being difficult or dramatic. "Oh, Zoe," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You always make things so complicated. It's a piece of paper. You're family. You're supposed to help your sister." That was when something inside me snapped. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowing my disappointment, of standing in the shadows, it all coalesced into a single moment of blinding clarity. The words he was using, family, help, complicated. I suddenly understood what they really meant. Family meant a one-way street of obligation that flowed from me to them. Help meant sacrificing my own needs and boundaries for Emma's wants. And complicated was what they called it anytime I dared to have an opinion or a desire of my own. "Be a good sister," he commanded, his voice turning hard. "It's what family does." "A good sister?" I repeated, my own voice dangerously quiet. "A good sister who throws a party that no one comes to? A good sister whose family chooses a car over her home? Is that the sister you want me to be?" There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I had never spoken to him like this before. "Don't be so dramatic," he finally sputtered, but the confidence was gone from his voice. "I'm not being dramatic," I said, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The calm that comes after the storm has already destroyed everything. "I'm being done. Do not use my address for anything. We can talk when you figure out how to apologize." I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the call. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I turned off the stove and looked at the pot of ruined chili. The phone call hadn't been an apology. It had been an invoice. It was the bill for my new life, my new home. They were telling me the price of my independence was their convenience. They had seen my beautiful new house not as a home to be celebrated, but as a new asset to be leveraged. The pain of their absence was still there, a deep, throbbing ache. But now it was mixed with a new feeling, resolve. They had pushed me too far. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. And for the first time in my 30 years, I was ready to show them just how wrong they were. The morning after the phone call, I woke up feeling hungover, though I hadn't had a drop of alcohol. My body ached with a strange combination of exhaustion and a tense, wired energy. The house was silent, but my mind was screaming. I had replayed the conversation with my dad 100 times, each replay solidifying the cold, hard resolve that was forming in my chest. For the first time, I hadn't apologized. I hadn't backed down, and the feeling was both terrifying and intoxicating. I was standing on a cliff's edge, and while part of me was afraid of the fall, another part was mesmerized by the view. I spent the morning cleaning. I scrubbed the pot of burned chili with a vengeance, scraping away the blackened mess until the stainless steel gleamed again. I threw away the cold, uneaten cornbread and poured the pitcher of watered-down iced tea down the drain. It was a ritual of erasure. I was cleansing my house of the party that never was, wiping away the residue of my own crushed hopes. With every swipe of the sponge, I felt a little stronger, a little more in control. Around 10 o'clock, just as I was wiping down the last of the counters, the doorbell rang. The sound was so unexpected it made me jump, my heart instantly hammering against my ribs. I wasn't expecting anyone. My new friends, my coworkers, didn't even know my address yet. A cold dread washed over me. I crept to the front window and peeked through the blinds. My dad's truck was parked at the curb, and they were all there, walking up my newly paved walkway as if they owned it. My dad, my mom, and Emma. They weren't angry or apologetic. They were smiling. They looked like a perfectly normal family coming for a pleasant morning visit. The disconnect between their cheerful demeanor and the venom of last night's phone call was so jarring it made me feel dizzy. This was their tactic, the one they'd used my whole life. Pretend the conflict never happened and simply move forward as if their will was already done. For a moment, I considered not answering. I could hide, pretend I wasn't home, and wait for them to leave. But the thought vanished as quickly as it came. No, I was done hiding. I had cleaned my house and now I would defend it. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and opened it. "Hi," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil I felt inside. I didn't smile. I didn't open the door wider to invite them in. I stood my ground on the threshold. "Zoe, honey, you're home," my mom chirped, pushing past me into the entryway. She thrust a scented candle in a glass jar into my hands. The label read, "Welcome home." It was the kind of generic last-minute gift you grab at a pharmacy. "We wanted to come see the place in the daylight. It's cute." She scanned the living room, her eyes lingering on the modest furniture. "Smaller than I pictured, but very cozy for you." Emma followed, her phone already in her hand, recording. "Hey guys, just checking out my sister's adorable new place," she narrated to her unseen audience, panning the phone around the room, conveniently leaving me out of the frame. She treated my home like a quaint backdrop for her social media content, a prop in the story of her own life. My dad was the last to enter, and he was all business. He was carrying a clipboard with a stack of papers neatly clipped to it. He gave me a brisk pat on the shoulder. "Morning, Zoe. Glad we caught you. We need to get some of this paperwork sorted out." He didn't mention our phone call. He was acting as if his demands had been perfectly reasonable, and my refusal had been a minor, temporary hiccup. I felt a surge of disbelief. They had brought props, a candle to feign affection and a clipboard to enforce their will. They weren't here to talk. They were here to transact. I closed the door and turned to face them, my arms crossed over my chest. The candle felt cold and heavy in my hands. "There's nothing to sort out," I said, my voice steady. "My answer is still no." My dad sighed, the sound of a patient man dealing with a difficult child. "Zoe, don't be difficult. I have the forms right here. We'll just add me to the deed. It's for estate purposes. It makes things much cleaner down the line and protects the house as a family asset." He used words like estate and asset to make it sound official and smart, a thin veneer of legitimacy over his blatant attempt to seize control. "A family asset?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "I bought this house. My name is on the mortgage. My money paid for the down payment. It is my asset." "Exactly," my mom chimed in, completely missing the point. "And as family, we protect each other. Your father knows best about these financial things." "You've always been so emotional." Emma finally lowered her phone, an annoyed expression on her face. "Zoe, seriously, what is your problem? It's not like you're using all this space. You're single. You're at work all day. I could move into the spare room. I'd even help with utilities. It would be a huge help for me to save money while I get my influencer business off the ground." She said it as if she were offering me a generous gift, the pleasure of her company and the honor of funding her vague career aspirations. The pressure in the room was immense. They had formed a triangle around me in my own living room, each of them pushing from a different angle. My dad with his false logic, my mom with her guilt, and Emma with her pure, unadulterated entitlement. The lifetime of conditioning, of being the good, quiet, accommodating daughter, was screaming at me to just give in. It would be easier. It would restore the peace, false as it was. My dad unclipped a pen from his clipboard and held it out to me along with a form. "Just sign here, Zoe. Let's not make this a bigger deal than it needs to be." I looked at the pen. I looked at the paper, which I now saw was a quitclaim deed form. He was trying to get me to sign away part of my ownership of my own home. And then he said the magic words, the ones that finally broke the spell. "Once we do that, you can easily pull out an equity line of credit, 60, maybe 70,000. It would be the perfect startup capital for Emma's business." There it was. The real reason. It wasn't about estate planning. It wasn't about helping Emma with a place to live. It was about money. They saw my house not as a home, but as a bank they felt entitled to withdraw from. My years of hard work, my sacrifices, my scraped knuckles and sleepless nights, all of it was just capital for them to liquidate for Emma's latest whim. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was dry and humorless. "No," I said, the word clear and sharp. "Excuse me?" My dad's face hardened. "No," I repeated louder this time. I set the candle down on the coffee table with a firm thud. "This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a group project. This is my house. You cannot have a piece of it. You cannot use it for your fraudulent schemes. And you will not be turning it into a slush fund for Emma." Emma gasped dramatically. "Oh my God, you are so selfish. I can't believe you." My mom's eyes filled with tears, the instant weaponized waterworks she deployed whenever she was losing an argument. "Why are you being so cruel, Zoe? After everything we've done for you? We raised you, we fed you. What have you done for me?" I shot back, my voice trembling with a fury that had been dormant for 30 years. "Did you help me with college? Did you help me save for this house? Or did you just take my money whenever you were in a bind?" I turned to my dad. Did you praise me for my achievements? Or did you just tell me that was what you expected? Did you ever once show up for me? My gaze landed on all three of them, their faces a mixture of shock and outrage. They were utterly stunned, not because of what I was saying, but because I was the one saying it. I was the backdrop, the scenery. I wasn't supposed to have lines. You want to talk about family? I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. Family shows up. Family celebrates each other. Family doesn't skip their daughter's housewarming party to go buy the other daughter a car she didn't earn, and then show up the next day to demand a piece of the house they couldn't be bothered to visit. That's not family. I don't know what that is, but it's not family. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier and more profound than any shouting match could ever be. I had said the unsayable. I had held up a mirror, and they were horrified by the reflection. My mother was the first to break. Her tears of manipulation turned into sobs of anger. You are an ungrateful, spiteful child, she hissed. My dad snatched the clipboard off the table. You have embarrassed this family, Zoe. You have embarrassed me. I think you have that backward, I said quietly. He marched to the door, yanking it open. Emma scurried after him, but not before turning to give me one last venomous look. My mom paused at the doorway, her face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, she said, her voice dripping with malice. You'll regret this when you're all alone in this empty little house. Then she slammed the door behind her. The sound echoed through the rooms. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, my body shaking from the adrenaline. The house was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt clear. It felt clean. It felt for the very first time completely and utterly mine. The slammed door was not an ending. It was a declaration of war. I stood in my living room for a long time, the silence ringing in my ears, my body trembling. The confrontation had drained every last drop of adrenaline from my system, leaving behind a shaky, hollow feeling. But beneath the exhaustion, a new and unfamiliar sensation was taking root, a fierce, protective instinct. They had tried to invade my sanctuary, and I had pushed them back. Now I had to fortify the walls. My phone buzzed on the coffee table where I'd left it. I picked it up. The family group chat, a forum I had mostly used to receive photos of Emma and announcements about her various minor accomplishments, was on fire. It was a digital assault, a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm and punish me. The first message was from my mother. I have never been so ashamed in my entire life. Your father and I are disgusted by your selfishness. Dad followed up immediately. You have a lot of nerve speaking to us that way in your own home, after all we've sacrificed. Do not contact us until you are ready to offer a sincere apology. Emma's was a screenshot of my Instagram profile with a long, rambling caption about how some people are just toxic and can't stand to see others happy, a piece of passive-aggressive performance art for her followers. Then the extended family started chiming in, recruited as soldiers in my parents' campaign. My aunt, who had been all smiles at the car dealership, texted, Zoe, your mother is in tears. Whatever is going on, you need to fix it. Family is everything. My uncle sent a single, blunt message. Show your father some respect. It was a flood of guilt, blame, and manufactured outrage. They were painting me as the aggressor, the ungrateful child who had suddenly and inexplicably turned on her loving, supportive family. My side of the story didn't matter because it didn't exist to them. In their narrative, my desire for boundaries was a cruel act of rebellion. I stared at the screen, watching the messages pile up. In the past, this would have broken me. I would have been consumed by guilt, desperate to make amends, to smooth things over and restore the fragile peace, no matter the cost to myself. But something was different now. The confrontation hadn't just been an outburst. It had been a severance. I looked at their words not as a loving family's cry of pain, but as a manipulator's toolkit. I muted the chat. Then, my finger hovering over the screen for a second, I left the group. The notification Zoe has left the chat felt like a small digital declaration of independence. But I knew that wasn't enough. The clipboard on my coffee table was a stark reminder that their entitlement went far beyond angry texts. They had been prepared to defraud me. It was time to stop just reacting and start protecting myself. My first call was to a 24-hour locksmith. I need to change the locks on my house, please, I said, my voice clear and steady. As soon as possible. The locksmith, a kind man named George with gentle eyes, arrived within the hour. He didn't ask any questions as he efficiently dismantled the old lock on my front door. I thought about the spare key I had planned to give my parents, a key that was still sitting in a dish on my counter. The thought made me shiver. As George fitted the new deadbolt, The sound of the drill was a comforting, decisive noise. When he handed me the new set of keys, they felt different from the first set. They didn't just represent ownership, they represented security. "All set," he said with a warm smile. "No one's getting in without one of these." "Thank you," I said, the words carrying more weight than he could possibly know. After he left, I locked the new deadbolt. The solid, satisfying thunk was the sound of a boundary being set in steel. My next step was to protect my finances. My dad's casual mention of an equity line of credit had terrified me. He knew my social security number, my date of birth, all the information he would need to try and financially entangle himself with my property. I sat down at my laptop and, with methodical precision, I froze my credit with all 3 major credit bureaus. Each online form I filled out, each confirmation email I received, felt like another brick in the wall I was building around my life. I was sealing the vulnerabilities, closing the doors they had always felt entitled to walk through. Then I moved on to the biggest asset of all, the house itself. I spent an hour online, researching property fraud and title theft. My fear grew as I read stories of family members forging signatures or using their power of attorney to steal property. My dad had brought a quitclaim deed. He was already one step down that path. The next morning, I called the county clerk's office. My voice trembled a little as I explained the situation in the most neutral terms I could manage. "I have reason to believe that a family member may attempt to fraudulently file documents related to my property," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Is there anything I can do to protect myself?" The woman on the other end of the line was surprisingly calm and helpful. She explained the process of filing a property fraud alert. It wouldn't stop someone from filing a document, but it would ensure that I was immediately notified if any changes were made to my deed. It was a tripwire, an alarm system. As I gave her my information, I felt another layer of protection settling into place. The final step was the hardest. The text messages hadn't stopped. They were now coming from individual numbers. My phone had become a source of constant anxiety. Every buzz sent a jolt of dread through me. I sat on my couch and opened my contact list. I scrolled to Mom. For a moment, I just stared at the name. A lifetime of memories, good and bad, flashing through my mind. The mom who taught me to ride a bike. The mom who dismissed my straight A's. The mom who had looked at me with such hatred in her eyes as she slammed my door. With a deep breath, I tapped block this caller. I did the same for my dad. For Emma. For my aunt and uncle. One by one, I silenced the voices that had dictated the terms of my life for so long. It was a brutal, painful process. It felt like I was cutting off a part of myself, but I knew it wasn't a limb I was severing. It was a poison I was draining. When it was done, the house was truly silent. No dings, no buzzes, no incoming barrage of blame. The quiet was vast and a little terrifying. My mother's final words echoed in my head. "You'll regret this when you're all alone." I looked around my living room, at the new lock on the door and the confirmation emails on my laptop screen. I was alone, but for the first time I didn't feel lonely. I felt safe. I had built a fortress, not of anger but of necessity. And for the first time since I'd turned the key in the lock, my house truly felt like a home. The days that followed the fallout were strange and quiet. My life, which had been so enmeshed with the constant low-grade hum of my family's needs and dramas, was suddenly silent. The silence was a physical presence in the house. At first it was jarring. I'd find myself instinctively reaching for my phone to check a group chat that no longer existed for me. I'd have a fleeting thought, "Oh, Mom would find this funny," before remembering I couldn't share it with her. It was like having a phantom limb. I kept feeling for something that I had deliberately amputated. There was grief in that silence. It wasn't a loud, dramatic sorrow, but a deep, hollow ache for the family I wished I had, the family I had spent 30 years pretending they were. I was mourning a dream, not a reality. The reality was that I had lost nothing but a source of constant pain and obligation. But letting go of the dream hurt more than I expected. To fill the vast emptiness, I turned my attention to the house itself. I had been so focused on the big projects, the painting, the floors, that I hadn't truly settled in. Now, I started to unpack the last of my boxes. I hung pictures on the walls, photos of friends from college, a beautiful print of a coastline I had visited once, a silly drawing I'd done as a kid that my grandmother had saved. Each nail I hammered into the wall felt like an act of claiming my space, of filling it with my own history, my own joy. I spent hours just existing in the rooms, learning their personality. I discovered that the morning sun streamed into the kitchen, making it the perfect spot for a cup of coffee. I learned that the spare bedroom, the one Emma had so casually claimed, had the softest light in the afternoons. ideal for reading. The house was no longer just a structure. It was becoming my partner in this new, quiet life. It held me in its silence, giving me the space I needed to heal. One afternoon, drawn by the patch of green outside my kitchen window, I went into the backyard. It was small and a little overgrown, but in the center stood the lemon tree. It wasn't a majestic tree, but it was sturdy, its leaves a glossy dark green. Several bright yellow lemons hung from its branches like small, cheerful ornaments. I walked over to it and ran my hand over the rough bark. I had barely noticed the tree during the chaos of moving in, but now it seemed to command my full attention. On a whim, I went back inside and Googled how to care for a lemon tree. I learned about proper watering, about pruning, about the kind of soil it needed to thrive. The next day, I went to a local nursery and bought a small trowel, a bag of citrus fertilizer, and a watering can. I spent the entire afternoon tending to the tree. I pulled the weeds that were choking its base. I carefully worked the fertilizer into the soil. I gave it a long, deep drink of water, watching the dry earth darken as it soaked it in. As I worked, my hands covered in dirt, a profound sense of peace settled over me. This tree was a living thing. It asked for so little, just water, sun, and a bit of care. In return, it offered shade and beauty and fruit. It was a simple, honest, reciprocal relationship. It gave without demanding, and it took only what it needed to grow. It was everything my family was not. I reached up and plucked one of the lemons from a low-hanging branch. It felt heavy and cool in my palm. I brought it inside, washed it, and sliced it in half on a cutting board. The scent that filled my kitchen was sharp, clean, and incredibly bright. It smelled like sunshine. It smelled like a new beginning. The silence of the house gave my mind the space to wander, to sift through memories I had long suppressed. I remembered my 10th birthday party. I had wanted a specific doll more than anything. My parents had told me it was too expensive. I understood. I didn't complain. But when I opened my gifts, there was the doll, only it was for Emma, an early gift for her 8th birthday, which was still months away. She just wanted it so badly we couldn't say no, my mom had explained, handing me a book. I had smiled and said thank you, my heart a small, hard knot in my chest. I remembered the time I had the flu in high school, a miserable, feverish week. My mom was so busy shuttling Emma to and from her various drama club rehearsals and social events that she barely had time to bring me a glass of water. Emma's minor social dramas always took precedence over my actual physical needs. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote these memories down in a notebook, not out of anger, but out of a need for validation. I was piecing together the evidence, creating a record of my own experience that no one could gaslight or deny. Each memory was a thread, and together they wove a tapestry that clearly spelled out the truth. This wasn't a new problem. This was a lifelong pattern. A few days later, I finally dealt with the last physical remnant of the housewarming. The Tupperware container of chili I had made was still in the fridge. I had transferred it from the burned pot, vaguely thinking I might eat it, but I never did. It was a cold, congealed reminder of my disappointment. I took it out, scraped the entire contents into the trash bag, and washed the container. As the last of the chili swirled down the garbage disposal, I felt a release. I was letting it go. I was done trying to salvage something that was ruined. That evening, I took a book and a glass of water out to the porch swing. The string lights I had hung for the party were still up, and I decided to leave them. They weren't for a party anymore. They were just for me. The air was cool and quiet. I leaned my head back and gently pushed the swing into motion, its familiar creak a comforting rhythm in the twilight. The silence didn't feel lonely. It didn't feel like a punishment. It was a choice. It was the sound of my own breath, the rustle of the leaves on the lemon tree, the distant hum of the city. It was the sound of peace. It was the sound of me finally coming home to myself. A week after the confrontation, the silence in my house had transformed from an absence into a presence. It was a peaceful, steady companion. The fortress I had built was holding strong. There were no more angry texts, no unexpected knocks on the door. There was just a quiet, predictable rhythm to my days. But the house, as peaceful as it was, still felt uninitiated. It had been cleansed of a painful memory, but it hadn't yet been filled with a happy one. The ghost of the party that wasn't still lingered in the corners. The idea came to me on a Wednesday evening. I was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I realized I didn't want my first memory of hosting in this house to be one of emptiness and rejection. I wanted to overwrite it. I wanted to warm my house with genuine affection, not fraught obligation. This time, there would be no performance. No desperate attempts to please people who were impossible to please. This time, it would be for me. I pulled out my phone and opened a group text. I added Sarah, a sharp, funny woman from my marketing team who had always been a quiet ally at work. I added Mark, another coworker, whose laid-back, goofy humor could make even the most stressful Monday bearable. And on a whim, I added a new contact, Mrs. Gable, my next-door neighbor. She was a woman in her late 70s who had introduced herself by bringing me a small pot of basil the day I moved in. She had a kind face and a warm, easy smile. The text I sent was simple. Hey guys, impromptu, very casual housewarming at my new place this Saturday. I'll provide pizza. No gifts, just bring yourselves. Let me know if you can make it. The responses were immediate and warm. Sarah, I'm so there. I'll bring wine. What kind do you like? Mark, free pizza? You don't have to ask me twice. I'll bring dessert. Mrs. Gable replied a few minutes later, her text written in all caps. That sounds lovely, dear. I will be there. I make a wonderful 7-layer dip. I smiled at my phone. It was that easy. No guilt, no pressure, just simple, uncomplicated kindness. Saturday arrived, and the difference in my preparation was night and day. There was no frantic cooking, no agonizing over playlists. I put on my favorite album, tied my hair up in a messy bun, and did a light tidying of the house. I wasn't trying to create a perfect, curated experience. I was just getting my home ready for friends. At 6 o'clock, I ordered 3 large pizzas from the local place down the street. Mrs. Gable was the first to arrive, right on time, holding a large glass bowl of her famous dip and a bag of tortilla chips. I hope this is all right, dear, she said, her eyes twinkling. It's my one party trick. She was dressed in a colorful caftan and radiated a grandmotherly warmth that I had always craved but never received from my own family. She looked around my living room and squeezed my arm. You've made this little house a home already. It has such a peaceful feeling. Her words were a soothing balm on a wound I didn't even realize was still so tender. Sarah and Mark arrived together a few minutes later, their arms loaded with 2 bottles of wine, a 6-pack of craft beer, and a comically large chocolate cake. We figured we should cover all the essential food groups, Mark announced with a grin. The 4 of us gathered in my small kitchen, and the house, which had been so silent for the past week, was suddenly filled with the easy, comfortable sound of laughter. We ate pizza straight from the box using paper plates. We drank wine out of my mismatched collection of glasses. The conversation flowed effortlessly, from funny stories about our boss, to Mark's disastrous attempts at online dating, to Mrs. Gable's surprisingly detailed review of a new action movie she had just seen. No one asked me for anything. No one inspected my home with a critical eye. No one treated my space as an extension of their own needs. They were simply there, sharing a meal and enjoying each other's company. At one point, Sarah and I were in the kitchen alone, grabbing another slice of pizza. She touched my arm gently. Hey, are you doing okay? You seemed really stressed last week, she said, her voice full of genuine concern. I hesitated for a second, the old habit of hiding my problems kicking in. But looking at her open, friendly face, I felt safe. It was just some family stuff, I said, deciding to share a small, simple piece of the truth. I had planned a housewarming for them last weekend and, well, they didn't show up. Sarah's expression softened with empathy. She didn't press for details. She just shook her head slightly and said, Wow, I'm sorry, Zoe. That's awful. Well, their loss. This pizza is amazing, and I'm definitely having a 3rd slice. Her simple validation, her immediate siding with me without needing the whole story, meant more than 1,000 empty apologies from my parents ever could. Later, we all migrated to the living room. Mark put on some music, a relaxed, folksy station that filled the room with a mellow vibe. Mrs. Gable was telling a story about the neighborhood in the 1960s. I looked around at the scene. Sarah was laughing at one of Mark's jokes, her head thrown back. Mrs. Gable was tapping her foot to the music. The soft glow of my string lights illuminated their faces. My small house felt full to the brim, not with people, but with warmth. Mark raised his plastic cup of beer. I'd like to make a toast, he announced, to Zoe and her awesome new house. May it be filled with good friends, bad jokes, and no burned chili. I laughed, a real deep belly laugh. Sarah lifted her wine glass. And to new beginnings and better boundaries, she added, looking at me with a knowing, supportive smile. To Zoe, Mrs. Gable chirped, raising her water glass. We all clinked our cups and glasses together. And in that moment, surrounded by the simple kindness of a few good people, I finally understood. A house is just wood and nails. You can't warm it with expensive furniture or perfectly curated decor. You warm it with love. Not the complicated, conditional, demanding love I had grown up with, but the easy, accepting love of friends. The love that shows up with pizza and wine and a 7-layer dip just because they want to be there. As my guests left later that night, they each gave me a hug at the door. "This was so much fun," Sarah said. "Thank you for having us." After I'd locked the door, I surveyed the happy mess of my living room. There were empty pizza boxes on the coffee table, a few stray paper plates, and a half-eaten chocolate cake on the counter. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was humming with the lingering energy of laughter and friendship. It had finally, truly been warmed. Months have passed since my real housewarming. The quiet in my life has become my new normal, a peaceful rhythm I've learned to cherish. The anger I felt has mostly faded, replaced by a kind of calm, sad acceptance. I've accepted that I cannot change my family, but I can change how I allow them to affect me. My fortress of boundaries has held, and inside its walls, I have started to build a life that is truly my own. Every now and then, an email or a text from an unknown number will get through. They are usually from my mother. The messages are no longer angry. They have shifted to a softer, more insidious form of manipulation. "We miss you, Zoe. I saw a little girl with her mother today and it made me cry, thinking of you." Or, "Family is forever, no matter what happens. I hope you'll remember that." In the past, these messages would have sent me into a spiral of guilt. I would have seen them as olive branches, as signs that I should be the one to bridge the gap. But now, I read them and see them for what they are, attempts to reel me back in without ever taking responsibility. They are apologies for their own pain, not for the pain they caused me. They miss the role I played in their lives. The reliable daughter, the financial safety net, the stable background character. I'm not sure they even know how to miss me. I delete the messages without replying. My life is smaller now, but it's also infinitely richer. My friendship with Sarah, Mark, and Mrs. Gable has deepened. We have regular pizza nights. Mrs. Gable has taught me how to properly prune my lemon tree. Mark helped me hang a heavy mirror in my hallway. Sarah has become the sister I always wanted, the one I can call with good news or bad, knowing she will meet me with unwavering support. I am slowly building a chosen family, one built on mutual respect and genuine affection. My house feels like a reflection of this new life. It's filled with things that make me happy. The potted plant from Mrs. Gable sits on my windowsill, thriving. The spare room is no longer a potential crash pad for Emma. It's my home office, a creative space where I've started writing again, a hobby I'd long abandoned. The front door, with its sturdy deadbolt, is a symbol of my right to decide who gets to enter my life. Sometimes, when I'm out on the porch swing in the evening, I think about my mother's last words to me. "You'll regret this when you're all alone." She thought being alone was the ultimate punishment, the worst possible fate. She never understood that for someone who had spent her whole life feeling lonely in a crowd, solitude could be a gift. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. I look at my little blue house, at the string lights casting their gentle glow. I look at the lemon tree, its branches now heavy with new green fruit. This is what I built, not just the house but the peace within it. My mother was wrong. I don't feel regret. I feel free. Family isn't forever when it treats you like an asset to be liquidated. It isn't forever when it demands your silence and your sacrifice as the price of admission. Real family, I've learned, is the quiet, steady support of those who want you to shine, not to stand in their shadow. It's the people who show up, not with clipboards and demands, but with pizza and kindness. I take a deep breath of the cool night air. The life I have is not the one I was handed. It's the one I fought for. It's the one I chose. And as I look around my small, quiet, perfect sanctuary, I whisper the words into the darkness, not for anyone else, but for me. I showed up for me. So if you've ever been excluded by the very people you've sacrificed for, hit like, subscribe, and drop your story in the comments. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying their house, it's finally building your own.